In Minecraft's early history, there have been a large variety of features that have been introduced and removed later for a multitude of reasons. Minecraft's very core identity was being shaped during this time and had a lot of directions it could have taken. These notable features show what could have been if they were left in the game and represent only a small amount of content that was mostly left behind. Here are 10 interesting lost additions that have been introduced throughout Minecraft's early lifespan. Unfortunately, I'm not going to cram them all into one video, but let me know if you would want a second part to this, as I would more than love to make another one. With that, we are now going to start off with some features from Indev. Have you ever taken a screenshot in-game before? Well, how about an isometric one? This was a feature only found in Indev. Throughout this early version of the game, you were able to take isometric screenshots using F7. This would not only take a picture of your entire world, but even shots of mobs in the same position when you took the screenshot. However, for some reason, the player could not be seen in the image unless they were in third person. With the introduction of infinite worlds, this was unfortunately removed since it would no longer be possible to capture the entire world. Indev versions actually had some nice customizable options for your world. You were able to select from 4 different map themes, one being the normal default. This is the world type that we are most familiar with in Minecraft today. There is a normal day-night cycle and not many lava hazards could be found except deep down underground. It could be described as an easy alternative to some of the other options. The next theme is named Hell and has a landmass surrounded by scorching lava. Mobs would spawn no matter the daylight cycle and the light level. It is a largely dark landscape and farming is difficult because of the reduction in the speed of crops growing. Overall, it would provide a challenge to overcome. Though this theme was removed, it would be added again as a dimension of its own, the Nether. Up next is titled Paradise. This was the easiest out of the 4. The sun will never set, the rate at which crops grow is increased, and the hostile creatures can only be found underground. And the last one works as a mediator in difficulty between the default and Hell themes. You would spawn in an island with a dense amount of trees that has a smaller amount of light because of its constant overcast weather. All of these would end up being removed in the middle of Indev. Their unique elements would carry on in the biomes that we have today. In addition to map themes, you were also able to have different map types. These include the normal terrain style of early Minecraft versions, a much flatter alternative reminiscent to the flat worlds we have now, a more hilly option that was without an ocean surrounding the landmass, but one that stands out is the floating islands option. This option would fill the map with many floating islands high up in the sky. The user would have to tread carefully as mining one of the sand or gravel blocks can cause the player to fall down below to their death. This world type takes a very different approach to how you would navigate the game. The setting was removed in Indev, though it would appear as a world option again, but was removed again in 1.18. During the Indev phase of development, the player would spawn in a 7x7 shelter whenever a new world was made. When first implemented, they were made out of mossy cobblestone, but was later replaced by oak wood planks with stone floors. For a large part of this structure's existence, you would spawn alongside 4 different chests. There would be one for every block in the game, another was for every item, this one had every wool, and the 4th one was filled with enough TNT to pretty much vaporize the entire world, should you choose to do so. These chests would soon be removed, leaving the structure empty inside except for some torches. Before they were removed, Notch had used these items for testing purposes. Once he moved on to testing the survival mechanics, he had no use for the chests, so he took them out. Before we get into the next development stage, I would just like to say that if you're liking the video so far, I make other videos similar to this one and would appreciate you subscribing and or liking the video. Now let's get back into it. On February 27, 2010, the first Infinite World version of the game was made, also known as Infdev, or Infinite Development. With this version, the small map that the player was once confined to had now been transformed into a world that is now 64 million blocks long and wide, though less than a fourth of the terrain generates normally. That is because after 12,550,821 blocks stands one of the most famous Minecraft bugs in the game. You will face the Farlands, a monstrous wall full of holes and crevices that keep going should you choose to continue traveling beyond the start of it. It didn't have a name until it eventually was gone after beta 1.8. What you see here is only one of the many different generation bugs that could be encountered deep into a direction of the world. These bugs are caused by what's called noise calculations. Pretty much, it is an algorithm that calculates what blocks will generate in your world. After a very long distance away from the spawn location, it would eventually start to break down and not function properly, generating an interesting phenomenon. The giant wall would be removed in Beta 1.8, but not before leaving a lasting legacy of wonder into terrain generation. Another early addition to Infdev was another anomaly that could be found many blocks away from spawn and had a very rare chance of finding. These are the enormous pyramids that could be found composed entirely of bricks. They would have a large base on the ground level and reach all the way to the world height limit. An update only mere minutes after being released, the world height limit would drastically be cut in half. This caused pyramids to end up having a bizarre flat part on top from being cut off. This giant structure had a dimension of usually 127 by 127 bricks. Doing the math, the total amount of brick blocks that the pyramid was made from is estimated at around 344,000. That is the same as 5,249 stacks. The common misconception about why this existed is because it would serve as a source of bricks since they could not be crafted at the time. The real reason why they generated was to test a generation of structures that would later be added into the game. During the same time that the brick pyramids would spawn, there would be two strange obsidian walls that would intersect with each other exactly where the player's spawn point would be. This wall would always be 2 blocks tall above the terrain it generates on, and would go on in all 4 directions for as long as the world still generated. These walls would not just regenerate on the surface, but go all the way down, replacing any blocks in its way. The purpose of this anomaly was to also test structure generation and the terrain generation's ability to generate structures, much like the brick pyramid. These walls also had the purpose of helping to locate the brick pyramid, which was always located 500 blocks southwest from spawn. Another phenomenon that could be encountered through the Infdev stage was the monolith. These were many chunks side by side that would suddenly shoot up into the sky 128 blocks to the world's limit. Mining under these would reveal a huge empty space where the terrain was meant to stay. These sudden environmental shifts, much like the far lands, happened as a result of noise calculations. They could be encountered anywhere in the world. They were eventually taken out in Alpha 1.2. What is interesting is that the monolith has returned somewhat. It is possible to generate these using customized options and worlds if you multiply the terrain density by any negative number. Minecraft would enter its next phase of development on June 30th, 2010. Not too long before this change, Notch would release update 1.0.4. This is the update that added the first appearance of a snow biome into the game. This was called Winter Mode. This mode could not be toggled on or off, instead the player would need to rely on by chance. When creating a new world, there was a 25% probability that the world would be entirely snowy instead of the traditional non-snowy world. Besides ice generating over water and snow falling on top of blocks, the world generates the same way as the traditional alpha world. This will be removed in a later version, but make its way back into the game several months later in beta with the introduction of different biomes. December 19th, 2010 will be the very last day of alpha because the next day was the start of the beta phase, the last stage set before the official release. In pre-release 2 of beta 1.9, cauldrons would make their very first appearance, but in a very different way than what players today are used to. When it was first added into Minecraft, the cauldron was a way to brew potions before the brewing stand took over that role. Upon filling the cauldron with a bucket of water, you could throw different ingredients into the cauldron, resulting in a vast combination of potions that could be created with up to multiple effects, for better or worse. This mechanic would end up being removed by the developers after this pre-release because it was too complex to work out at the time. And that was all 10. However, I'm going to be sharing a bonus feature. This last one is a feature that is only found in Minecraft Pocket Edition. It used to exist as a part of a huge update of the game. For a while, users had to use this to receive unobtainable and rare items. In Alpha 0.5.0, the Nether Reactor was implemented. To create this, you needed 4 gold blocks on the corners of a 3x3 grid, then place cobblestone like this, then finally crafting and placing a Nether Reactor core in the center. If done correctly, tapping on the reactor would spawn a room of obsidian around you and the reactor instantly, while the reactor itself would change textures to bright red obsidian. Seconds later, zombie pigmen would spawn in the room to attack you while a large variety of items dropped to the ground throughout. After 45 seconds, pigmen stop spawning, the red obsidian reactor turns to obsidian, and pieces of the walls of the rooms would disappear, letting the player out. After looking out into the aftermath, you could see that the room was a part of a giant spire. I remember when I started the Nether Reactor my first time, I had built the structure very close to my house, and after finishing the encounter, I go outside to see that the structure had generated over a large part of my house. It destroyed a chest with everything inside just gone. So I spent close to 20 minutes mining obsidian out of my house, each time watching the touch meter slowly fill up. After that, there was still much to do, and my 9-year-old self couldn't take the trauma I was experiencing anymore, so I left. But later that day, I had gained the determination I needed to finally go back and fix what I had done. So when I plopped back into my world, I knew I was going to do it. I mined a few more blocks. Then left again, and never went back. Ironically, in version 0.6, the obsidian spire that would generate would change to be netherrack, becoming much easier to destroy and making it much more better with the intended purpose of bringing the nether to the player's world. The reactor lasted for a few years before being removed once the nether was added. The nether reactor core would still be accessible with hacks, and today, you can download data packs or mods to bring this feature back into the game. Just be sure to build it a little distance away from your beloved structure. With that last mention, we'll conclude some interesting concepts that made their way into the game in early iterations. While many of these have started to become more recognized with time, I think there are still a few that do not get the attention that they deserve, and I hope with this video it will provide them just that. With that said, I hope you learned something new today, like and subscribe, and have a good one.